I'm sorry, I saw you have a baby stroller at your door. My daughter has been crying non-stop and I just spilled all her formula. Could you please spare some? I'll pay you back tomorrow morning, I promise." Her voice trembled in the late night, holding a 6-month-old baby who was wailing. Nathan Reid stood behind the doorframe, his face pale as if someone had just punched him in the stomach. 5 seconds of terrifying silence passed. The baby cried louder, his jaw clenched tight. "You're insane," he said, his voice shaking with rage. Or perhaps something else. Something deeper and far more painful. Then he slammed the door right in her face. The sound of the door closing echoed through the empty hallway. Lauren Hayes stood frozen, holding crying Emma, trembling and completely confused about what had just happened. But what she couldn't know was that on the other side of that door, Nathan Reid was leaning against the wall, unable to breathe. And for the first time in 8 years, he let the tears fall. Nathan Reid's penthouse occupied the entire 42nd floor of the building, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the city that most people would never afford to see in their lifetime. The furniture was expensive, carefully selected by designers he'd never met. Everything was in its place, perfect and empty. At 2:15 in the morning, he stood in his kitchen, hands gripping the marble counter so hard his knuckles turned white. The baby's cry still echoed in his ears, mixing with another cry from 8 years ago, one that had stopped too soon, too suddenly, in a way that had destroyed everything he thought he knew about living. The stroller. She'd seen the stroller he kept by the door like some sick ritual, a shrine to a life that ended before it really began. His ex-wife had begged him to throw it away before she left. His therapist suggested donating it might bring closure. Nathan had said no every time, because removing that stroller would mean admitting his son was really gone. And he'd spent 8 years refusing to reach that moment. He opened the cabinet above the sink where rows of organic baby formula stood, expensive brands perfectly organized by age range. He bought them monthly, telling himself it was for corporate charity. He never actually sent them. They just accumulated, a monument to the father he'd stopped being when his 2-year-old son, James, had died in a car accident. Nathan hadn't been driving in because he'd been in a board meeting he'd convinced himself was too important to miss. Nathan pulled out 3 cans of formula suitable for a 6-month-old. His hands shook as he placed them in a bag and walked to his door. The hallway was empty. She was gone. He placed the bag against the stroller where she would see it if she came back this way, then went inside and stood by his window, looking out at a city full of lights, feeling more alone than he had in months. Lauren Hayes sat on the floor of her small apartment 3 floors below. In the building's low-income housing section she could barely afford even with her nursing salary. Emma had finally exhausted herself to sleep on Lauren's chest. The apartment was tiny, 1 bedroom that doubled as living room and kitchen, but it was clean and it was theirs. She felt stupid, humiliated, desperate enough to knock on a stranger's door at 2 in the morning because she'd seen a baby stroller and made an assumption. The way he'd looked at her, like she'd done something unforgivable just by existing in front of him with her baby. "You're insane." The words stung because part of her agreed. She'd been running on 3 hours of sleep for 6 months, working night shifts while her neighbor watched Emma, barely scraping together enough for rent and formula and diapers. Maybe she was going insane. She carried Emma to the crib and sat beside it, watching her daughter sleep. Emma's father had left the day Lauren told him she was pregnant, saying he wasn't ready, as if readiness was a choice you could opt out of. Lauren had been angry for months. Now she was just tired. She had to be at the hospital by 7 for a double shift. 3 hours of sleep if she fell asleep right now. She closed her eyes, but all she could see was the man's face behind that door, the anger and pain that had nothing to do with her and everything to do with whatever that stroller really meant. At 6:30 the next morning, Lauren found a bag on her doormat. Inside were 3 cans of premium organic formula, The kind she'd looked at in stores but never bought because they cost 3 times what she could afford. No note, no explanation. Just the formula. The man who'd called her insane had somehow figured out where she lived and left this. Lauren held the bag, feeling the weight of 3 cans that meant 3 weeks she wouldn't have to choose between formula and electricity. She didn't understand, but as she stood there, she felt something shift in her chest. Not gratitude exactly. Something more complicated, like the beginning of a question she didn't yet know how to ask. Nathan hadn't slept. At 7:30, as he left for another day of running a company he'd built from nothing and now barely cared about, he saw the stroller still by his door and found himself hoping she'd walk by. She didn't. 3 days passed. He saw her once, getting into the elevator as he was getting out. She had Emma strapped to her chest in a carrier, a heavy bag over her shoulder. Their eyes met for just a second. She looked like she wanted to say something. He looked away first, walking past her like she was invisible, and hated himself for it. Because she had a baby. Because every time he saw that baby, he saw James. Because 8 years of therapy hadn't fixed whatever was broken inside him. That night, Nathan went down to the building's shared laundry room in the basement, something he hadn't done in months. It was 11 at night. He told himself no one would be there. But someone was. Lauren stood folding tiny clothes while Emma slept in the carrier on her chest. She looked exhausted, swaying slightly as she worked. Nathan froze in the doorway. He could leave, should leave. But something kept him there, watching her fold a onesie so small it fit in the palm of her hand. She sensed his presence and turned. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Lauren said quietly, "Thank you for the formula." Her voice held no accusation, despite what he'd said to her, despite how he'd acted in the elevator. Just simple gratitude that made him feel worse. "You're welcome," Nathan managed, his voice rough and unused. He cleared his throat. "Is she okay? Your daughter?" "Emma. Her name is Emma." Lauren shifted protectively. "She's okay. Thanks to you." Silence stretched between them. Nathan should say something else, but words had never been his strength. Numbers, strategies, negotiations he could do. Human connection had atrophied somewhere between building his empire and losing his son. "The stroller," Lauren started, and Nathan's body went rigid. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have assumed. I didn't mean to—" "Don't!" He cut her off, the word harder than intended. "Just don't." He turned to leave. "I lost someone too," Lauren said to his back. Nathan stopped. "Emma's father left before she was born. I know that's not the same as whatever you lost, but I understand what it's like when everything you thought your life would be just isn't." Nathan stood with his back to her, hands clenched at his sides. He should keep walking. Instead, he heard himself say, "My son was 2. Car accident. 8 years ago." The words felt like glass in his throat. "I'm sorry," Lauren whispered. Nathan turned around. She was crying, tears running down her face while Emma slept peacefully against her chest. "I should go," Nathan said. But he didn't move. Neither did she. They stood in the fluorescent light, 2 people marked by different losses, held in a moment of understanding neither had expected. "My washing machine is broken," Lauren finally said, wiping her eyes. "I've been coming down here every night after she falls asleep." Nathan nodded. Then, surprising himself, he said, "I'll have maintenance look at it tomorrow." "You don't have to—" "I know." They looked at each other, and something shifted, subtle as a door opening just a crack, letting in light neither had realized they needed. Over the next 2 weeks, Small things kept happening. Lauren's washing machine was fixed and replaced with a new one. Fresh groceries appeared at her door. Her car, which had been making terrible noises for months, was suddenly repaired. The mechanic said someone had paid anonymously. Lauren wasn't stupid. She knew who was behind it. Part of her was grateful. Part of her was uncomfortable. Part of her wanted to demand he stop. Except she wasn't managing fine. She was drowning, and these anonymous helps were the only things keeping her head above water. She saw Nathan occasionally in the elevator, the lobby, the coffee shop on the corner. Each time, he nodded. She nodded back. They didn't speak, but something was there between them now, an acknowledgement neither knew what to do with. Lauren started noticing things about him. The way he was always alone, the way expensive suits hung on him like he'd lost weight, the way he held himself apart from everyone like he'd forgotten how to exist among people, the way he looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. She recognized that look. She saw it in her mirror every morning. One evening, Lauren struggled to get Emma's stroller through the lobby door while carrying grocery bags and her work bag. Everything was about to tumble when someone caught the stroller. Nathan. He'd come in behind her and without a word held the stroller steady while she adjusted. "Thank you," she said. "Let me help you upstairs," he replied. "You really don't have to." "I know." That phrase again. The same one from the laundry room. "I know, but I'm doing it anyway." They rode the elevator in silence. Nathan pushed the stroller while Lauren carried the bags. At her door, she turned to face him. "Nathan, I know you've been helping me. The formula, the washing machine, the groceries, the car. I know it's you." He didn't deny it. "And I'm grateful, really. But I need to understand why. You don't even know me." Nathan looked at Emma, watching him with wide eyes from her stroller. His face did something complicated, pain followed by something softer. "Because you knocked on my door," he said quietly. "Because you were desperate and alone and needed help. And instead of helping, I called you insane and slammed a door in your face. Because I've spent 8 years being angry at a world that took my son, and that anger has turned me into someone I don't recognize." He looked at Lauren. "Because maybe if someone had helped me when I was drowning, things would have been different. Because maybe it's not too late to be a better person than I've been." Lauren felt tears prick her eyes. "You don't owe me anything." "Maybe not," Nathan agreed. "But maybe I owe it to myself." "Would you like to come in?" Lauren heard herself ask. "For coffee?" "I'd like that," Nathan said. And he meant it. Nathan sat at Lauren's small folding table, holding instant coffee that was the best he'd had in years. They talked. Really talked. Lauren told him about nursing, the exhaustion, the way she loved helping people even when it drained everything. About Emma's father, about being alone, about the fear that she wasn't enough. Nathan found himself talking too. About James, the accident, how his marriage crumbled because grief made them strangers. About building his company as a way to avoid feeling anything. About the stroller he couldn't throw away and the penthouse he couldn't make into a home. "Do you ever stop feeling guilty?" Lauren asked. "No," Nathan said honestly. "But I think you learn to carry it differently. I haven't figured out that part yet." "Me neither," Lauren admitted. "I feel guilty all the time, that I'm not giving Emma enough, that I'm too tired to be the mother she deserves." "She's lucky to have you," Nathan said. Emma started fussing. Lauren stood to prepare her bottle, and Nathan surprised himself by saying, "Let me." Lauren hesitated, then handed him the formula. Nathan's hands shook as he measured it out, mixed it with water, tested the temperature on his wrist. Muscle memory from James. He handed the bottle to Lauren, who settled on the couch with Emma. Nathan sat beside them, keeping careful distance, watching Emma drink. "She's beautiful," he said softly. She is, Lauren agreed. She's everything. After a comfortable silence, Lauren said, "Will you tell me about him? About James?" Nathan's throat tightened, but for the first time in 8 years, he wanted to talk. He loved trucks, garbage trucks especially. Every Tuesday, he'd drag me to the window to watch. He had this huge laugh that was too big for his body, and he gave the best hugs, just threw his whole body at you. Nathan's voice cracked. I took a meeting the day of the accident. My wife was driving him to his grandmother's. I chose a conference room over my son, and 3 hours later, he was dead. Lauren reached over and took his hand. She didn't say it wasn't his fault. She just held his hand and let him break. Nathan cried for the first time since James's funeral. When he finally stopped, Lauren handed him a tissue. "I'm sorry," Nathan said. "Don't be," Lauren said. "I cry about once a day. You're in good company." Nathan laughed, a wet sound. "Can I come back tomorrow, just to talk?" "I'd like that," Lauren said, and she meant it. Nathan came back the next day and the day after that. It became routine. He'd knock around 8 after she got home from work. Sometimes he brought dinner from restaurants she'd never been to. Sometimes she cooked simple meals she stretched to feed two. They'd eat and talk while Emma played or slept. They talked about grief and guilt and loneliness, about hopes they'd stopped believing in. Slowly, carefully, they became friends. But the world outside didn't stop. Lauren's financial situation worsened. The hospital cut her hours. 3 days before rent was due, her landlord slipped an eviction notice under her door. She had 1 week to come up with the money, or she and Emma would be out. That night, when Nathan came over with Chinese food, he knew immediately something was wrong. "What happened?" Lauren tried to smile. "Nothing. Just tired." "Lauren." He said her name with weight. She broke, showed him the eviction notice, told him about the cut hours and bills she couldn't pay, and the terror of being homeless with a baby. Nathan read the notice, his face darkening. "How much do you need?" "No." Lauren said immediately. "I'm not taking money from you." "Why not?" "Because I don't want your charity. Because we're friends and I don't want money to ruin that." "Lauren, I have more money than I could spend in 5 lifetimes. Money that sits in accounts doing nothing. Money I made working 80-hour weeks instead of being with my son. That money is just numbers. But giving it to you, helping you and Emma stay in your home, that would mean something. That would be the first time in 8 years that money actually did something good." "I can't pay you back," Lauren said. "I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to let me help. I'm asking you to let someone care about what happens to you. I'm asking you to stop carrying everything alone." Lauren felt tears spill down her face. Pride warred with desperation. "If I say yes, everything changes." "Maybe it needs to change," Nathan said. "Okay," Lauren whispered. Nathan paid her rent, 6 months in advance. He paid her electric bill and set up an account at the grocery store. When Lauren tried to thank him, he shook his head. "You let me cry about my son without judgment. You gave me a place to be broken. This doesn't even come close to evening the score." But they both knew something had shifted. The balance between them had changed. The next few weeks felt different. Nathan came over less. When he did, things felt strained. Lauren couldn't shake feeling she owed him something she could never repay. Nathan couldn't shake feeling he'd crossed a line. They were careful with each other, polite, like strangers again. It hurt worse than loneliness had, because now they knew what they were missing. The breaking point came 3 weeks later when Lauren's neighbor mentioned casually that she'd heard Lauren was dating that billionaire who lives on the top floor, Nathan Reid. Lauren's blood went cold. "What?" "Nathan Reid, tech billionaire. worth like $3 billion. Everyone in the building knows who he is. After her neighbor left, Lauren stood in her apartment, pieces clicking together. The expensive dinners. The way he'd paid 6 months' rent without blinking. She'd known he had money, but she hadn't known he was Nathan Reid. She'd seen his face on magazine covers. Everyone knew who he was. Except her. Lauren felt sick. All this time she'd thought they were equals, but they weren't. They never had been. He was a billionaire, and she was a struggling single mom he'd decided to help out of guilt or pity or boredom. The humiliation was overwhelming. She'd cried to him about money problems while he was worth billions. She'd been a charity case, a project, someone he could fix to make himself feel better. When Nathan knocked that evening, she didn't let him in. "We need to stop doing this," she said through the crack in the door. "Lauren, what? I know who you are, Nathan Reid, the billionaire, and I can't do this anymore. Let me in. We can talk. There's nothing to talk about. You've been very kind, and I appreciate everything. But I think it's better if we keep our distance. Lauren, please. I mean it, Nathan. Don't come back." She closed the door, and Nathan stood in the hallway, feeling like he'd just lost something he couldn't live without. Nathan tried to respect her wishes. Stayed away, didn't knock, gave her space. But he couldn't stop thinking about her. About Emma. About how her apartment had been the only place he'd felt at peace in 8 years. 2 weeks later, his assistant mentioned that Lauren Hayes had returned all the money he'd given her. "She's returning everything. She said to thank you, but she doesn't need it anymore." Nathan stared at the check from Lauren's personal account. If she'd returned 6 months of rent plus everything else, she'd drained her savings. "Did she say anything else?" "Just that she appreciated your kindness, but she's managing fine on her own." She wasn't managing fine. She couldn't be. But she'd rather struggle than take money from him. He'd done this. His money, his identity, the gulf between them that he'd pretended didn't exist, had destroyed the one good thing he'd built in 8 years. That night, Nathan walked through the city with no destination. He walked until he found himself at the cemetery where James was buried. He hadn't visited in 4 years. Nathan sat on the grass beside the small gravestone. "I met someone," he told his son. 2 people. A woman named Lauren and her daughter Emma. Emma's about the age you were. Lauren needed help, and I helped her, and we became friends, real friends. And I was happy, James. For the first time since you died, I was happy. But I ruined it. I let money get in the way. I wasn't honest about who I am. And when she found out, I lost her." He wiped his eyes. "I built this whole life after you died. Made all this money, got all this success. But none of it means anything. You know what meant something? Sitting in Lauren's tiny apartment talking about real things. That meant something. Watching Emma laugh. Feeling like maybe I could be around a child without falling apart. But I threw it away because I didn't know how to just be Nathan, not Nathan Reid, the billionaire." He sat there for a long time. When he left, he knew what he had to do. Nathan spent 3 days working, not on his company, but on something else. Then he went to Lauren's door one more time. When she opened it, exhausted with Emma crying in the background, he said, "I know you asked me not to come back, but I need you to hear something. Then I'll leave if you want." Lauren hesitated, then nodded. "You're right that I wasn't honest about who I am, and I'm sorry. But nothing about our friendship was fake. The nights we spent talking, the way you let me cry about James, the way I felt like myself around you and Emma, that was the most real thing in my life. You weren't a project or charity case. You were my friend. My only friend." He pulled out an envelope. "This isn't money. It's information about a nursing position at a private clinic. Better hours, better pay, full benefits, on-site childcare. I know someone on the board. They're looking for experienced nurses. Your name came up. I didn't pull strings. I just made sure they knew you were looking. Whether you get the job is entirely up to you and your qualifications." Lauren took the envelope, confused. "Why would you do this?" "Because you told me you wish you could find a job with better hours to spend more time with Emma. Because this is help that doesn't make you dependent on me. Because even if you never want to see me again, I want you to be okay." Emma's crying got louder. Lauren looked torn. "I need to go," Nathan said. "Take care of her. If you want the job, the contact information is there. If not, throw it away. Either way, you weren't a project. You were the person who reminded me what it felt like to be human." He turned to leave. "Nathan?" Lauren called. He stopped. "Thank you for the information and for being honest, finally." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. Nathan went back to his penthouse. He looked at the stroller by his door for a long moment, then gently folded it and carried it inside. He placed it in his closet, not throwing it away, but not keeping it as a shrine anymore. Just a memory. A piece of James he could hold without letting it define him. It was time to learn how to live again. Lauren got the job. The interview was rigorous, but they offered her a position based entirely on her merit. Better hours, better pay, on-site childcare that meant she could see Emma during breaks. It changed everything. She could sleep regular hours, eat sitting down, be present for Emma's milestones. For the first time in 6 months, Lauren could breathe. She wanted to thank Nathan, but pride and hurt kept her away. 3 months passed. She'd see him sometimes in the lobby, both pretending not to notice. It hurt more than loneliness had, because now there was a Nathan-shaped hole in her life. The universe pushed them back together on a rainy Tuesday in November. Lauren was leaving with Emma, heading to the pharmacy because Emma had caught a cold. Nathan was coming home from a charity event, exhausted. They reached the lobby door at the same time. Both hesitated. Then Emma, fussy and miserable, reached out her little arms toward Nathan. Not to Lauren, to Nathan. She made the sound she made when she wanted to be held, and before anyone could think, Nathan had taken her. Emma settled immediately against his chest, her hot forehead against his shoulder, and went quiet. Lauren stood frozen, watching her daughter find comfort in the arms of the man they'd pushed away. Nathan stood equally frozen, holding this tiny, sick child, remembering James at this age. But this time, the memory didn't break him. It ached, yes, but underneath was something else. Something that felt like healing. "She's burning up," Nathan said softly. "I was going to get medicine," Lauren said, voice thick with emotion. "I'll drive you." "Nathan, you don't have to." "I know," he said, "but I want to, if you'll let me." Lauren looked at Emma, peaceful in Nathan's arms. "Okay," she whispered. They drove to the pharmacy in Nathan's car, Emma dozing between them. Nathan waited with Emma while Lauren went inside. When she came back, Emma was awake, holding Nathan's finger and babbling to him. Nathan was talking back seriously, like her nonsense syllables were the most important conversation he'd ever had. Lauren got in and just watched them. "She likes you," she said. Nathan looked at Emma, then Lauren. "I like her too. I was scared to. Scared it would hurt too much. But being around her doesn't hurt the way I thought. It's different. James will always be part of me. The missing him, the wishing things had been different. But Emma isn't James. She's herself. And letting myself care about her doesn't mean I'm replacing him. It means I'm living. Actually living. Which is what he'd want." Lauren felt tears slide down. "I'm sorry I pushed you away." "You had every right." That doesn't mean it was right. I was hurt and scared. But I understand now. Money doesn't change what we had. Doesn't change that you're one of the best people I know. That you showed up when we needed someone. That you let me see you broken. Those things are real. The friendship is real. And I miss it. I miss you. Nathan reached across and took Lauren's hand. I miss you too. Both of you. My penthouse feels emptier now because I know what it's like to have somewhere to belong. So what do? Figure it out as we go. Take it slow. Let things be messy because real things usually are. I can do messy and complicated, Lauren said. Nathan laughed, a sound like relief. Me too, apparently. They drove back. Nathan helped get Emma upstairs and settled. When Emma fell asleep, they sat on Lauren's couch with instant coffee that tasted like coming home. Can I ask you something? Lauren said. The stroller, I haven't seen it in months. Nathan was quiet. I put it in my closet. I'm not ready to let it go completely, but I'm also not ready to keep living like James is still here. It's a step. That's good, Lauren said. That's really good. They talked for hours, catching up on 3 months. Lauren told him about Emma's daycare, friends at work, how stable hours changed her life. Nathan told her about programs he'd started at his company, reconnecting with old friends, therapy where he was finally doing the work. They talked about grief changing shape, but never leaving, about guilt and forgiving yourself, about loneliness and letting people in. Slowly, they rebuilt what had broken. Not the same as before. Something different. Something stronger because it survived being tested. Over the next months, Nathan became part of their lives again. He came for dinner twice a week, taught Emma to wave, and helped her take first steps. Was there when Lauren had bad days, when Emma spiked fevers at midnight? He was there, consistently, in ways that mattered. Lauren was there for him too. When the anniversary of James's death came and Nathan couldn't get out of bed, she brought Emma over and sat with him, didn't try to cheer him up, just sat in his grief, let him hold Emma and cry, stayed until he could breathe again. They became family, not traditional family, not any kind that had a name, but family nonetheless. People who showed up for each other, who loved each other's broken and whole parts equally. One evening in March, almost a year after Lauren knocked on Nathan's door, they sat on his penthouse balcony watching sunset. Emma slept in a portable crib Nathan kept there now. I've been thinking, Nathan said. That's dangerous, Lauren teased. He smiled. I want to do something with my money. Start a foundation. Support for single parents. Childcare assistance. Emergency funds. Job placement. All the things you needed when you were struggling. Would you help me run it? Not full-time, but help me make sure it actually helps people, designed by someone who knows what it's like to need help. I'd be honored, Lauren said. They launched the James Reid Foundation 6 months later, wanting his son's name attached to something that helped people, something that mattered. The foundation helped hundreds of families in its first year. Single parents who needed childcare, families with medical crises, people who'd lost someone and didn't know how to keep going. They gave money, but also resources and community, and the message that you don't have to carry everything alone. Lauren ran family support programs while working reduced clinic hours. Nathan handled business but made a point to meet the families they helped, to hear their stories, to remember that behind every application was a person. Emma grew, started talking, called Nathan Uncle Nuff. She didn't understand the complicated history. She just knew Nathan was someone who showed up, who loved her, who was family. On a quiet Sunday 2 years after that desperate knock, Nathan and Lauren sat in her apartment. She'd upgraded to 2 bedrooms, but kept the same building to stay close to the foundation's office. Emma was at a playdate. It was rare to have time alone. "Do you ever think about that night?" Lauren asked. "When I knocked on your door?" "All the time," Nathan said. "I think about how close I came to not opening it, how close I came to missing all of this. I think about how you called me insane and slammed the door, and then left Formula anyway because underneath all that pain, you still cared." "You saved my life," Nathan said quietly. "You know that? You and Emma. I was just existing, going through motions, building wealth that meant nothing. Then you knocked needing help, and helping you reminded me what it felt like to be connected to something real. You saved me too," Lauren said. "I was drowning and you threw me a lifeline. But more than that, you saw me, not as a charity case, as a person, as a friend. You gave me the gift of being seen." They sat in comfortable silence. Then Nathan said, "I need to tell you something. I'm selling my penthouse." "What? Why?" "Because it's not home. It never was. Just an expensive place to hide." He took a breath. "I'm buying a house. Something smaller, with a yard, a garden. The kind of place where people actually live. It has a guest house with separate entrance, own kitchen, 2 bedrooms. I was thinking, if you wanted, you and Emma could live there. No rent, just friends sharing property. You'd have privacy, your own space. But we'd be close. A family, in the way we've become family. Only if you want. No pressure." "Yes." Lauren interrupted. "Yes?" "Yes. Emma and I want that. We want to be close to you. We want family dinners and shared yards, and the kind of life where people show up for each other. We want home. With you." Nathan felt something tight in his chest, for 10 years, finally loosen. Not the grief. That would always be there. But the isolation, the sense he had to carry everything alone. That loosened, let light in. They moved in 3 months later. Main house and guest house on a quiet street with old trees. Emma had a yard. Lauren had a garden. Nathan had a kitchen where he cooked Sunday dinners for more than himself. They had a life. A real, messy, beautiful life. Emma's 3rd birthday party was held in that yard. Friends from Lauren's work, families from the foundation, Nathan's assistant, and employees who'd become friends. Nathan's ex-wife came with her new husband. She and Nathan had made peace, could honor James's memory without the weight of failed grief crushing them. As the party wound down and Emma opened presents with 3-year-old chaos, Nathan stood on the porch watching. Lauren came to stand beside him with 2 cups of coffee. She handed him one. "What are you thinking?" "About how life doesn't turn out the way you plan. About how I thought my story ended when James died. That everything after would just be going through motions. But I was wrong. The story just changed. Became different than expected. Harder in some ways. But fuller. Richer. More real." "I'm glad you opened the door that night," Lauren said. "Even though you called me insane and slammed it in my face." "Especially because of that," Nathan said. "Because it meant I was still capable of feeling something. It meant I wasn't completely dead inside. And look where it led." He gestured to the yard, to Emma laughing, to the life they'd built from a desperate moment at 2 in the morning. It led here, to family, to purpose, to knowing that what I do with my life and money and time actually matters, to understanding that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means learning to hold grief and joy at the same time. It means letting people in even when you're terrified, because connection is worth the risk. Always. Lauren leaned her head on his shoulder. "James would be proud of you. I think he'd be proud of both of us. Proud of the family we've become, the way we show up for each other, The way we chose to keep living and loving even when it was scary. They stood as the sun set, painting the sky in colors that promised tomorrow. Emma ran over, demanding Uncle Nuff come see her new bike. Nathan went, scooping her up and swinging her around while she shrieked with laughter. Lauren watched them, her daughter and this man who'd become so much more than she could have imagined, that desperate night when she'd knocked on a stranger's door asking for help. Life wasn't perfect. There were still hard days when grief hit Nathan like a wave, when Lauren felt overwhelmed by single parenthood, despite support, when they argued about boundaries and help and what family meant. But they worked through it. They showed up. They loved each other messily and imperfectly and truly. The foundation grew, helped thousands, created programs that changed lives, built community. Nathan never forgot. It all started because a desperate young mother knocked on his door asking for baby formula, and instead of staying closed off in grief, he'd chosen, eventually, painfully, slowly, to open up, to let life in again, to let love in again. Not romantic love, though the world often assumed. They were something else, something without a tidy label. Two people who'd found each other in their darkest moments and decided to face the light together. A man learning to live after loss. A woman learning she didn't have to carry everything alone. A child growing up surrounded by chosen love. A family built from broken pieces that somehow fit together better than anything whole ever could. Years later, when Emma was old enough to ask how they became family, Lauren told her the story. About knocking on a door at 2 a.m, about a man who'd lost his son, about baby formula and small kindnesses that built into something bigger, about learning to help and let each other in. Emma listened, then asked, "So Uncle Nafi is family because you knocked on his door?" "No," Nathan said, joining from the kitchen. "I'm family because when your mom knocked, scared and desperate and needing help, it reminded me I was still human, still capable of caring about someone other than myself, still able to choose life over grief. She gave me that gift without knowing it, and I've spent every day since trying to be worthy of it." "That's a really long answer," Emma said. "The short answer is yes." Lauren laughed. "I knocked," he answered, "and we all became family." "That's a good story," Emma decided. And it was. Not a fairy tale. Not a romance. Not a neat narrative with perfect ending. Just a story about two broken people who found each other at exactly the right moment, when they were both finally ready to be found. A story about how family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's a knock on a door in the middle of the night. Sometimes it's a can of baby formula left outside an apartment. Sometimes it's choosing to show up, day after day, even when it's hard. Sometimes it's learning that wealth isn't measured in money, but in moments. In laughter over instant coffee, in tears shared without judgment, in a child's hand held between two adults who love her, in a life built from the wreckage of old lives, imperfect and real and exactly right. Nathan Reid stood in the yard of the home he'd bought to replace his empty penthouse, watching Lauren teach Emma to plant tomatoes in the garden they'd built together, and felt something he hadn't felt in over a decade. Peace. Not the absence of pain. Pain was still there, would always be there when he thought of James. But peace alongside the pain. Joy alongside the grief. Life alongside the memory of loss. He'd spent so many years believing happiness died with his son, that the best he could hope for was successful numbness. But he'd been wrong. Happiness hadn't died. It had just been waiting. Waiting for a desperate knock on his door. Waiting for a woman brave enough to ask for help. Waiting for a baby girl who'd grow up calling him Uncle Nafe and teaching him that love doesn't replace love, it multiplies it, waiting for him to choose again and again, to open the door instead of hiding behind it. And he was grateful. Grateful for the knock that changed everything. Grateful for the family they'd become. Grateful for the foundation they'd built in James's name that turned his son's death into something that helped others live. Grateful for every messy, complicated, beautiful moment that led them here, to this yard, this garden, this life, this home. The sun set behind them, casting long shadows across the grass. Emma's laughter rang out as she accidentally sprayed Lauren with the garden hose. Nathan walked over to join them and got sprayed too, and they all laughed together like families do. Not perfect people, just people doing their best. Just people who'd found each other when they needed finding most. Just a billionaire and a single mum and the little girl who'd brought them together, building a life that money could never buy, but that turned out to be the richest thing any of them had ever known.